Welcome to the Everyday Conversion Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Severcrop, and I am just like you. I'm busy with work, family, kids, church, and a million other responsibilities. And honestly, some days I miss my personal scripture study and prayers. And some days we as a family miss our scripture study and prayer. But I'm trying. So if you're not perfect in living the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, but you're trying, we'll get along great, and this is the place for you. 5 days a week, I'll share a brief episode, often based on the Come Follow Me curriculum for that week that I'm using to have daily conversations with my kids, whether we're on our way to school or on our way home, or if it's real quick before dinner. And you're welcome to use them to do the same with your family or your personal study. Just know that the views and opinions I share are mine alone and do not represent the official doctrine and viewpoint of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now let's jump right in with today's episode. All right, welcome back to the Everyday Conversion Podcast. This is episode 6 of season 2. You can get everything we talk about today at everydayconversion.com/BOM6. And I have a serious question for you, and I know it's going to throw you off a little bit, but what if the Book of Mormon isn't as miraculous as we think it is? I'll let that hang there for a second. Now let me explain what I mean. Because I believe, and this is a feeling that I got as I was studying today, I believe that sometimes, at least me personally, I might make out the experiences in the Book of Mormon to be more miraculous than they actually were at the time. And because they aren't as miraculous as we probably imagine them to be, it's actually more miraculous. I know I'm probably confusing you. I know I'm confusing myself even saying it, but let me tell you what I mean. Let me explain. So I'm reading First Nephi chapter 2, and I'm reading phrases like, and there's phrases in First Nephi chapter 1 as well. But in First Nephi chapter 2, the very first verse, behold, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto my father. Verse 2, it came to pass that the Lord commanded my father. In verse 19, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto me. So we have all of these experiences. And then in chapter 1, same thing. Came to pass as he prayed, there came a pillar of fire and dwelt upon a rock before him. So that one probably actually did happen. But I wondered, and I had this thought as I was reading chapter 2. And the thought was, when we read things like that, we read things like the voice of the Lord, the Lord spake unto my father. Came to pass that the Lord commanded my father. The Lord spake unto me. I think we immediately think of a Moses type experience where the earth and the heavens shake, and the voice, this towering and thundering voice comes down and speaks to them, and they hear an audible voice. And no doubt those things can happen, and no doubt they have happened. And I could be completely wrong, and maybe they happened at that point for Lehi and for Nephi. But the thought I had was, they could have just been promptings. They could have just been what I experience, what I feel like a quote unquote normal person experiences. They could have been feelings that they had. They could have been impressions. They could have been words that came into their minds. Because I realize that we have to realize that Nephi is writing this after the fact. He's looking back on what happened and explaining to us what happened. And I can tell you in my life, when I look back, it is much easier for me to look back after I have received a prompting. I've followed that prompting and I've seen the result. It's easier for me to look back and say, the Lord spoke to me. I was inspired.
The Spirit taught me something. As I look back, I see that much clearer than I did during the event. And I can tell you there have been times in my life, quite recently, as recently as yesterday, I had one of these where looking back now, I was 100% inspired. I was yesterday. My wife early in the morning got violently sick, violently um, puking for an hour straight, and I had the thought come into my mind: you need to give her a blessing, and this is what you need to say. And I struggled with it for 20 or 30 minutes. No, I can't say that. I can't say that. No, no, I can't. What if it doesn't? What if that doesn't happen? What if that doesn't isn't fulfilled? And I struggled with it. And I asked myself during that I had an argument with myself, is that just me wanting something or is that the Spirit? I followed the prompting. I said what I felt like I was supposed to say. I gave the blessing and it happened. It happened. My wife told me the next day of her experience as I gave her that blessing and afterwards. It happened. And so I look back at that now 24 hours later and I can say that the Lord spoke to me, that I heard. It was like I heard words in my mind. It was like I knew what I was supposed to say. But in that moment, no way. There was no way I believed that. I was struggling with myself. I was fighting to try to figure out if that's what I was supposed to say, if that was the Spirit, or if it was just my own thoughts and what I wanted or hoped or was my idea. So, what if Lehi and Nephi were the same way? What if everybody in the scriptures was that same way? And we're just getting the after the fact explanation of Nephi. I don't know how much later he wrote this, but let's just, for the sake of argument, assume that it's when he's in the promised land. He's later on in life and he decides that he needs to sit down and he needs to write everything that happened. He was probably keeping records during the time, but let's assume that he maybe sat down and did a full biography of his life. And looking back after he's gone through the wilderness, after he's built the ship, after he's seen the power of God shake his brothers, after he's been on the waters traveling to the promised land, after he's almost been killed, but he was saved by the Lord, after the storms were abated because of his faith, after they got to the promised land, after he saw his father bless him and his family and his brothers and their families, after he saw the Lord protect him after his father died, and prompt him and guide him to leave so that his brothers wouldn't kill him. After he saw his family become a very established and powerful nation towards the end of his life, looking back, no doubt he saw the the decisions that his father made and the decisions he made in a different light. He saw the revelation that at the time he may not have seen as such. And to me, looking at it that way and seeing it that way in no way, shape, or form diminishes their experiences. As a matter of fact, to me, it magnifies them. It makes them so much more amazing to me because it wasn't just easy. Lehi didn't just wake up one day and say, well, I think I've got to leave Jerusalem. The voice of the Lord spoke to me and I'm going to do it. Lehi was like me, or I'm like Nephi or Lehi, in that he was a father trying to understand what he was supposed to do for his family, struggling with what he was supposed to do. It couldn't have been an easy decision. I think we diminish the spiritual value of what Lehi did. We diminish his growth and his testimony and his belief and his faith if we think that he just woke up, had a vision one day, and decided, well, I've got to leave Jerusalem. We diminish it. We lose the power of what Lehi did if we don't think about and realize that he was probably just like us. He probably struggled with this decision. He had a feeling, he had an impression, it wouldn't leave his mind, but he still had to have faith and step forward and do it. No doubt if Everything we learn in the scriptures about faith is faith is an evidence of things that are hoped for, or no. What is that scripture? What is it? Hebrews 12:6. Now I gotta find it because it's gonna drive me nuts. So getting out my scriptures, you're gonna listen to me rustle through my scriptures, trying to find this exact quote. 12:6, right? Hebrews 12:6. Nope, 6:12. Oh, this is Mark trying to figure out. Nope, not that one either. What is it? It's in Hebrews, right? You know what I'm talking about. You know the scripture I'm talking about. Hebrews. Oh, this is going to drive me nuts. Now I can't find it. And you guys are all sitting there. You're listening to this, hearing me struggle and saying, "You idiot, it's this." And you're screaming at me, trying to tell me what this scripture is. Is it Hebrews 11:6? Maybe it's 11:6. I'm just going to have to go to the Book of Mormon. I should have probably done that. Oh, yeah. Okay. Wait. Nope. Okay. I give up. I can't find it. So I'm going to go to Alma because I know in Alma 32 it says it. I think it's Alma 32. Now I'm second guessing myself on that one too because maybe I'm wrong there too. But it's about faith. And it's what faith is. Let's see here. Faith. Okay, Alma 32:21. Faith is not to have a perfect knowledge of things. Therefore, if you have faith, ye hope for things which are not seen, which are true. Ye hope for things which are not seen, which are true. So we diminish Lehi's experience if we don't recognize and realize that he had faith, and that faith is when you hope for things. What was it? You hope for things which are not seen, which are true. And so Lehi struggled. He had to have struggled with this decision to leave his possessions, to leave his livelihood, to leave everything he had. Not that he was some sort of materialistic person, but just because he had worked hard for these things. He had a good life. He had to have. It talks about the possessions they had, the precious things, the gold, the silver, all the things that he had. He had worked hard for those things. And no doubt he was a righteous person who believed that he was providing for his family. And now he feels this impression. He feels this prompting. A thought won't leave his mind that he needs to leave it all behind. All the things that he has acquired to provide for his family, to give them a good life, to give them the best future that he could. And now he's being asked to go into the wilderness, which no doubt he knew was dangerous. He had to put his family in danger. It couldn't have been an easy decision. And it's not, I can't believe for myself that he just woke up one day and knew it was what he was supposed to do and didn't struggle with it at all. And to me, it makes it all the more miraculous, knowing that he was just like me, knowing that he was a father struggling to lead his family, struggling to understand whether this was just his own thoughts or whether it was the Spirit prompting him. To me, that's even more powerful. And when Nephi says that the Lord spake unto him, no doubt the Lord spoke to him like he speaks to all of us. Maybe Nephi did hear a voice, and I have no doubt at certain times in his life he did have visions, and he was visited by angels and by even the Lord, perhaps. I'd have to search to know that for sure, but no doubt those things did happen. But the overwhelming majority of the time, he probably was spoke to like we're spoken to, through scriptures that he read, through promptings that he received, through just impressions that wouldn't leave his mind, through what seemed like actual words in his mind, but he had to struggle and ask himself, is this my thoughts or is this the Spirit? And then looking back, he looked at this and said, that was a time the Spirit spoke to me. That was the Lord telling me what to do, just like my experience with giving the blessing yesterday. Looking back, I know that it was the Lord telling me what to do. I know that those were words put into my mind by the Lord through the Spirit. But at the time, I didn't know it. And I've had lots of experiences like that. We hear people say, the Lord spoke to me. And I think more often than not, it's words in our mind, it's impressions, it's thoughts, it's, ideas that won't leave, or ideas where you just know that that's what you're supposed to do. But it's not a physical voice most of the time, it's not an actual voice. And for me, realizing that changes everything about following Lehi's family and their story. I had a realization yesterday. I posted an image on Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, you can go there, everydayconversion.com/Instagram. Follow me there. Share some quotes and ideas, and I go live sometimes. It's really cool. But I quoted the intro paragraph from Come Follow Me that I shared in yesterday's episode, which we'll also link to in the show notes. And I took out part of it, and this is the part that I shared. I said, I quoted, it says, quote, "Rarely in scripture is there such a lengthy account of a family trying to live the gospel. There's real power in following the examples of faith that this family, despite their imperfections, demonstrated." And I highlighted certain words. And it didn't occur to me until this morning after I looked at this image many different times. After I'd seen it as I was scrolling through Instagram, as I had looked at it when someone had liked it or made a comment and I'd responded to them. And I finally read just the words that I highlighted. And this is what they are. A family trying to live the gospel despite their imperfections. A family trying to live the gospel despite their imperfections. And it blew me away because it tied in with everything that I just shared with you, with this idea that Lehi didn't just magically have um, the voice of the Lord come to him and he had no doubts or worries. We see that later in First Nephi. He worried, he struggled, he made mistakes. He wasn't a perfect father, he wasn't a perfect priesthood leader. He doubted. He had times where he struggled, just like I do. His was a family trying to live the gospel despite their imperfections. They weren't perfect. They didn't do everything right. They didn't magically know what they were supposed to do. They struggled and they tried to figure it out. And to me, that is the most miraculous thing about the Book of Mormon. The lack of it being miraculous in the way that we often think of it is the exact thing that to me makes it even more miraculous because it's applicable. Because Lehi was just like me as a father in a lot of ways. No doubt better than me because he was called to be a prophet, but in so many ways just like me. And Nephi was just like so many youth, struggling to try to learn to recognize and understand the Spirit. And Laman and Lemuel were like so many youth who struggle between the balance of relying on their parents' testimony and developing their own testimony and figuring out for themselves what they believe and what the right choice is and trying to understand why they're being asked to do certain things and making mistakes and sometimes making mistakes. But just like us. And that is absolutely to me miraculous. It is unbelievably miraculous in its lack of being miraculous, in its lack of voices from heavens and earth shaking, which certainly happened, and we read about it happening. But just like in our lives, I believe in Lehi's life and Nephi's life, that was the exception rather than the rule. That wasn't the normal way that they were given direction. They were given direction just like we were, through impressions and feelings and promptings and words coming into our minds and thoughts that just won't leave us, that just nag at our mind. That's the way the Spirit works. It's the way it works for us. It's the way it works for them. It's not as miraculous as we think, but in so many ways, it's more miraculous than we ever imagine. You can get everything we talked about today at everydayconversion.com/BOMC. 6, including that scripture in Hebrews that I am going to find and put in the show notes. So have a good day. We'll see you in the next episode.
All right, that's it for today. Now, I know you want to hang out with me longer, but we both have a ton of things to do today, including living the gospel and trying to be like Jesus. Cue primary children singing.
I'm trying to be like Jesus.
But hey, if you want to get the links to everything we talked about today, you can find it on the episodes page of everydayconversion.com. You can also do cool stuff like subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast listening platform, sign up for email notifications of new episodes, and connect with us on social media there. It's kind of like a virtual church library without the militant librarians or a piece of paper to sign out your 3 tiny pieces of chalk for your lesson. Also, just remember, I do my best to make sure my opinions are in line with official church doctrine, but they are just that. They're my opinions. For official doctrine and viewpoints, I recommend you go to churchofjesuschrist.org or comeuntochrist.org.